I want us to stay friends since he came back. My fiancé said this holding our new apartment key. I took it calmly, said nothing, and walked out into the Charleston night. I am Mason, 29M, water treatment facility engineer. Been with Paige, 27F, for 3 years. Engaged for 8 months. She produces environmental podcasts and has this passion for storytelling that first drew me to her. We met at a sustainability conference where she was interviewing experts about water quality issues while I was presenting new filtration technology. She had this way of asking questions that made complex engineering feel urgent and important. "You are not just cleaning water," she said. "After my presentation, you are protecting entire communities." I fell for her intelligence before I even noticed how beautiful she was. When I proposed 18 months later at the same conference venue, she cried and said she would never felt so understood. We spent months planning our Charleston wedding, touring venues overlooking the harbor, tasting caterers who specialized in locally sourced seafood. Everything was perfect until Garrett returned from overseas. He had been covering environmental crimes in Southeast Asia for 2 years, exposing corporate pollution poisoning river systems. Paige had worked with him before he left, producing audio content for his investigative pieces. She had mentioned him occasionally, always professionally, describing his work as groundbreaking and fearless. When he came back with what he called the story of the decade about American companies dumping chemicals in developing countries, Paige's entire energy shifted. This could change everything. She told me over dinner that first week, "This could actually stop these companies from destroying communities like yours. Protect." I supported her excitement. Investigative journalism was important work, but then came the late research sessions stretching past midnight. Canceled venue visits because Garrett needed help organizing source materials. Cold dinners I ate alone, while she texted him about interview strategies and legal protections. "This is temporary," she assured me when I mentioned feeling disconnected. "Once we get the story published, things will go back to normal." But normal was disappearing one canceled plan at a time. Our conversations became entirely about Garrett's investigation, his sources, his deadlines. When I tried discussing wedding timeline or apartment move-in dates, her responses felt distracted and impatient. "Can we talk about this later? I need to focus on something that actually matters right now." The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in November. I had prepared dinner and waited until 9 of the clock, watching our food get cold while she worked late again. When she finally came home, she was carrying a box of her things from the studio and had this strange, determined expression. She set the box down and pulled our new apartment key from her pocket, holding it like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "Mason, we need to talk. I have been thinking about us, about what I really want from life." The key caught the light as she turned it over in her palm. "Garrett's offered me a partnership on this investigation and others like it. Real journalism that could expose corporate environmental crimes on a global scale." I felt something cold settle in my stomach as she continued. "I think we should take a break from the engagement. I want us to stay friends since he came back." She extended the key toward me like it was a peace offering instead of the end of everything we had built together. I took it calmly, said nothing, and walked out. I spent that first night in my truck parked at Folly Beach, listening to waves crash while processing what had just happened. The engagement ring I had planned to upgrade sat in my glove compartment, suddenly meaningless. By morning, I had made my decision. I drove straight to my brother Connor's place in Somerville, 20 miles inland, where he offered his guest room without asking questions. "Stay as long as you need," he said, helping me unload my single duffel bag. For 3 days, I called in sick and sat on his back porch, drinking coffee and watching his kids play. Their simple joy reminded me that life continued even when your own plans collapsed. When I returned to work that Thursday, I threw myself into projects with renewed focus. My supervisor noticed immediately. "You seem different," she said during our weekly review. "More decisive, more willing to take on challenging projects." She was right. Without wedding planning consuming my evenings, I had mental energy for innovations I had been postponing. I redesigned our emergency response protocols and proposed efficiency improvements that could save the city thousands annually. Work became my anchor, something concrete that couldn't be taken away by someone else's changing feelings. But what I discovered 6 months later changed everything I thought I knew about why she really left me. Update 1. So after Paige left, I completely threw myself into work. My supervisor wasn't kidding when she said I seemed different. Within 2 months, I had streamlined 3 major processes and identified cost savings that caught the attention of our Federal Oversight Committee. That is when opportunity knocked. The Tennessee Emergency Management Agency needed an experienced engineer to lead water purification efforts in rural communities devastated by flooding near Gatlinburg. Mobile filtration systems for displaced families, establishing long-term infrastructure where traditional utilities had been destroyed. It is challenging work, my supervisor explained. Remote locations, temporary housing, working directly with disaster victims. But it is exactly the kind of innovation you have been pushing for. I accepted immediately, figured it was perfect timing to put distance between myself and Charleston's memories. The mountains near Gatlinburg were nothing like coastal lowlands I knew. Instead of salt air and flat horizons, I found myself surrounded by rolling peaks and pine forests, living in a FEMA trailer while overseeing installation of portable treatment units in 3 flood-damaged towns. The work was grueling. Hauling equipment through mud, calibrating systems in makeshift shelters, teaching community volunteers how to maintain filtration units that could mean the difference between safe drinking water and waterborne illness. But each successful installation felt personal, like I was rebuilding not just infrastructure but my own sense of purpose. The families I worked with had lost everything but showed remarkable resilience. "Water's the foundation," explained Martha, a retired teacher whose house had been swept away. "Get that right, and we can start over." Purifying our mobile systems, making them more durable and easier to operate. These weren't just engineering problems anymore. They were human problems requiring solutions that real people could implement. 3 months into the Tennessee assignment, I was contacted by Riley Morrison, the federal community liaison, coordinating between our technical teams and local governments. She needed to discuss equipment placement for our newest installation site. We met at a diner in downtown Gatlinburg. Riley was around my age, with this direct way of speaking that reminded me why I had always preferred working with engineers over marketing people. But she wasn't an engineer. She was a policy specialist with a background in rural development, who understood both the technical requirements and political realities of our work. "The community in Cosby is skeptical of outside help," she explained over coffee. "They have been promised solutions before that didn't materialize. We need to make sure this installation actually works for their specific needs, not just our project requirements." I found myself genuinely interested in her insights about community dynamics. Unlike Paige, who was always drawn to dramatic stories and larger-than-life personalities, Riley focused on practical solutions that made real differences in people's daily lives. We spent 3 hours discussing implementation strategies, and I realized I hadn't thought about Paige once during our entire conversation. Over the next month, Riley and I worked closely on the Cosby installation. She had this gift for explaining technical systems in terms that made sense to people without engineering backgrounds, building trust between communities and federal agencies that had historically been suspicious of outside intervention. People need to understand not just how systems work, but why they are designed the way they are. She explained one afternoon as we calibrated flow rates. Once they see the logic, they become partners instead of just recipients. I was starting to appreciate that kind of thoughtful approach to problem solving. No drama, no urgent deadlines driven by external pressures, just careful work that built something lasting. Then I got a call that made me realize Paige's sudden career obsession hadn't been about journalism at all. My college roommate Derek reached out completely out of the blue. He worked in environmental media in DC and had some news about Paige's groundbreaking investigation with Garrett. "Dude, I don't know if you want to hear this, but that big expose your ex was working on. It fell apart completely. Turns out, half of Garrett's sources were fabricated, and the whole story was based on documents that couldn't be verified." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean fabricated?" "I mean, the guy's career is over. He is being investigated for journalistic fraud. The publication that was going to run the story is facing a lawsuit. Your ex-man. She has been completely hung out to dry." I sat in my trailer that night, processing this information. Paige had blown up our engagement for a story that didn't exist, with a man whose entire investigation was built on lies. But what really got to me was realizing that even if the story had been legitimate, she had still chosen excitement and drama over our partnership. The fraud just made it clearer that she had been chasing something that was never real to begin with. The next morning, Riley stopped by my trailer with coffee and noticed I seemed distracted. Everything. Okay, you look like you got some bad news. I found myself telling her the whole story, about Paige, about Garrett, about how I had ended up in Tennessee running from a relationship that imploded over a journalism project that turned out to be completely fake. Riley listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions that helped me process what had happened. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Sounds like she was more in love with the idea of being part of something dramatic than actually building something real with you. That simple observation hit harder than any of the anger or hurt I had been carrying around for months. But what happened next made me realize I had been looking at this whole situation completely wrong. Update 2, just got back from a work conference in Nashville. Sorry for the delay. My phone was blowing up with messages after my last post. Thanks to everyone who said I wasn't crazy for feeling blindsided by all this. So after Riley and I talked about the whole Paige situation, something shifted between us. Not romantic immediately, more like I finally felt understood by someone who appreciated steady work over dramatic gestures. Riley had this way of seeing my engineering mindset as an asset, rather than something boring that needed to be spiced up with constant excitement. When I showed her innovations I had developed for the water treatment systems, she got genuinely excited about the practical impact rather than just the story potential. This isn't just technical improvement, she said, reviewing my documentation for a new filtration process. This is infrastructure that could serve these communities for decades. You are building something that outlasts the headlines. That is when I realized what I had been missing with Paige. She had been attracted to my work because it gave her access to important stories. But Riley appreciated it because she understood how foundational systems actually change lives. We started spending more time together, reviewing community feedback on our installations and planning improvements for future deployments. The collaboration felt natural in a way I had never experienced. Two people building something bigger than what either could accomplish alone. 6 months into the Tennessee project, my division got approval for a major expansion. The federal program was being scaled up to serve disaster-prone communities across the Southeast, and they wanted me to lead the technical development team. The position came with a substantial raise and the opportunity to design systems that could be deployed rapidly during emergencies while establishing permanent improvements to community water security. You have created something that scales, the program director told me during our quarterly review in Washington. Not just emergency solutions, but long-term resilience building. Riley's community outreach had become equally successful, with her training programs being adopted as models for rural development projects across Appalachia. When the expansion was announced, she was offered the position of Regional Community Partnerships Coordinator. We celebrated that night at a steakhouse in Knoxville, talking about how our separate career advances could complement each other in the expanded program. For the first time since Paige left, I was genuinely excited about the future rather than just focused on getting through each day. I want to keep working with you, Riley said over dinner. Not just professionally. This feels like something worth building. That is when I knew I had found someone who understood partnership in a way Paige never had. Riley wasn't looking for excitement or drama. She wanted to build something lasting with someone who shared her values. We had been together 8 months when I got the call that changed everything. It was a Saturday morning, and Riley and I were reviewing environmental impact studies on my back porch when my phone rang. Unknown Charleston number. Mason. It is Paige. I hadn't heard her voice in over a year. She sounded different, smaller, uncertain in a way I had never heard before. I know I have no right to call you, but I needed to tell you something. About why I left, about what really happened with Garrett. Riley looked up from her paperwork, immediately understanding from my expression who was calling. She squeezed my hand supportively but didn't say anything. The investigation was a disaster. Mason, everything fell apart. Garrett, he wasn't who I thought he was. He fabricated sources, made up documents. The whole story was fake. I already knew this from Derek, but I let her continue. But that is not even the worst part. I found out he had a girlfriend the entire time in Seattle. He was never serious about me or our professional partnership. I was just convenient while he was building his fake story. She started crying then. I threw away 3 years with you for someone who was using me to legitimize fraud. I lost my job, my reputation, everything. I have been trying to rebuild for months, but I keep thinking about how stupid I was to give up the best thing in my life. Riley was watching my face carefully, ready to give me space if I needed it, but also clearly prepared to support whatever I decided. I am calling because I heard through mutual friends that you are doing amazing work in Tennessee. Federal contracts, leading a whole program. I am so proud of you, Mason, and I am so sorry I wasn't there to support you when you were building all this. There was a long pause. Then she asked the question I knew was coming. Is there any chance? Could we try again? I know I messed up everything, but I have learned from it. I understand. Now what I lost. I looked at Riley, who was calmly reviewing her paperwork, but clearly listening. This woman who had supported my work from day one, who had helped me build something meaningful, who had never made me feel like I needed to be more dramatic or exciting to earn her attention. Paige, I said finally, I am glad you called to apologize. I needed to hear that, but I am with someone now. Someone who appreciates the kind of partnership you were looking for with Garrett, but wants to build it with me. The silence on the other end stretched for nearly a minute. Is she good to you? Paige asked finally. I looked at Riley, who was now smiling softly while pretending to focus on her work. She is exactly what I needed. Someone who sees steady as strong instead of boring. When I hung up, Riley set down her papers and moved closer to me on the porch swing. How are you feeling? She asked. Grateful, I said, honestly. Grateful that she left. Grateful that I found this work. And grateful that I found you. But the next morning brought a development I never expected. One that would test everything Riley and I had built together. Final update. Writing this from our new place in Asheville. Riley and I relocated here 6 months ago when my promotion evolved into leading a federal division developing water infrastructure for climate resilience. She is managing community partnerships for rural development projects across the region. After Paige's call, I thought that would be the end of it. Closure achieved, moving forward with Riley, case closed. But life had other plans. 2 weeks after that conversation, Paige showed up in Gatlinburg. Just appeared at the diner where Riley and I were having lunch, looking nervous and determined. But I needed to see who you chose over me. Riley handled it with more grace than I expected. You must be Paige. Mason's told me about you. Would you like to sit down? What followed was the most mature conversation I had ever been part of. Paige admitted she had driven to Tennessee, hoping to convince me to give her another chance. But seeing Riley and me together made her understand why I had moved on. You two work, she said simply. The way you communicate, the way you support each other's ideas. I never gave Mason that kind of partnership. Riley was incredibly kind throughout the conversation, even offering insights that helped Paige process what had happened with Garrett and her career. Excitement feels like passion when you are young, Riley said, but partnership is what sustains you long term. Mason doesn't need someone to make his life more dramatic. He needs someone who appreciates the foundation he builds. When Paige finally left that day, she shook Riley's hand and thanked her for the kindness. Take care of him, she said. He deserves someone who knows how lucky they are. Riley smiled. I absolutely do. The next day, Paige sent a final text. Thank you both for yesterday. I am going to delete your contact information now, not out of anger, but because you have clearly built something beautiful together, and I don't want to interfere with that. I hope you are happy, Mason. You deserve it. I showed the message to Riley, who nodded approvingly. That took maturity. Maybe she finally learned something from all this. 6 months later, we are settled in our Asheville house, working on projects that feel meaningful while building something personal that is based on mutual respect rather than constant drama. Riley brings coffee to my home office on Saturday mornings when I am reviewing project proposals. I help her organize community training materials for water safety workshops she conducts in rural schools. This is what partnership actually looks like, she said one evening, as we reviewed environmental impact studies together. Two people building something bigger than what either could accomplish alone. The water infrastructure work is expanding rapidly as climate change creates more frequent disasters. My team has developed systems that can be deployed within hours while establishing permanent community improvements. Riley's outreach programs are being adopted across Appalachia. We talk about marriage occasionally, but without the urgent pressure that characterized my relationship with Paige. I want to marry you, I told Riley one morning while we were installing a monitoring station near our house. But I also love what we are building right now. She smiled, adjusting equipment with steady hands. Same. We will know when the timing feels right. No rush. That confidence in our future without needing to define every detail immediately feels like proof. I finally found the right partner. When Riley posted a photo of me working on a mountain installation with the caption "Steady hands build lasting things," I felt deep contentment about the life we have created. The image showed me alone in beautiful scenery, but it represented everything we have accomplished as a team. Some people chase excitement and mistake chaos for passion. Real partnership is building something that can weather any storm together. Riley and I have created exactly that, and I have never felt more certain about any decision in my life. Last month, I heard through Charleston friends that Paige took a job with a nonprofit in Portland, doing communications work for clean water initiatives. Good for her. She found a way to use her skills for something meaningful without the drama. Sometimes the best thing that can happen is having someone show you exactly why you shouldn't be with them, so you can find who you are actually supposed to build something with.